Now.
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It's 6:06 this Tuesday morning. Good morning. Thanks for joining us. We've got plenty for you. Coming up at 6:35, Cal Thomas will join us. At 7:05, Scott Walker from Young America's Foundation knows a thing or two about campus protests and about Wisconsin, where President Trump will be campaigning today. At 7:35, the Lieutenant Governor of Virginia, Winsome Sears, love to ask her about what should be done about the encampments at University of Virginia that just sprouted up overnight. And then at 8:05, Congressman Michael Waltz, who seems to think that the President of the United States illegally having highly classified documents in his garage is a bigger deal than the Justice Department thinks. That's all coming up. It's Larry O'Connor. And in for Julie Gunlock this morning is Mollie Hemingway of The Federalist and Fox News and Alexandria. Good morning.
Good morning. It's great to be here with you, Larry.
It is really great to have you here. We didn't even mention your great husband, Mark Hemingway, who's one of the finest writers around.
Agreed.
Well, you have to. But I don't have to, and I would say so. For the brief 12-week glorious time that I was at the Weekly Standard, Mark was one of my only friends over there, and I always appreciated not just his work, but he's just got the greatest temperament. He's the greatest guy to be around.
It really is nice.
Yeah.
I mean, when you're married to someone like that who's just kind of calm.
You two are cool. You're like a power couple.
Well, I'm happy to be married. I'll just say that.
To him.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right.
But also marriage is great.
Just marriage in general is pretty cool. All right. Donald Trump, as we mentioned, has a day off from the trials in Manhattan, and he will be campaigning. He's got a rally scheduled for Madison, Wisconsin, which, by the way, is also seeing their host of pro-Hamas encampments and everything. And then he'll be campaigning in Michigan. This is why they're doing these trials. They don't want him to be able to do this.
Yeah, it's good that he has a single day to be on the
nice?
Campaign trail, but it's absolutely ridiculous that this trial is going on, that charges were ever brought. How it's being conducted by the judge is just, I think people have kind of become inured to what's happening because so many different Democrat prosecutors are trying to imprison their top political opponent that they're kind of like, oh, well, I guess that's just what they're doing.
Yeah.
This is not how we used to do things in this country. We did not handle political disputes using the courts until quite recently.
Yeah, and it's not like we couldn't have. It's not like there was reason to, or there wasn't reason to, I should say, up until now. There are plenty of things that presidents have done that rise to the level of, at the very least, maybe charges, let alone a full-blown trial.
In this New York case, even left-wing people admit that there's no case here, that this is like a complete and utter joke.
Of course, the same people who said that a year ago when the charges were brought are not saying that today because this is the last. They think this might be the only one that they're going to have before election day.
Right. When the indictment dropped, everyone said that this was preposterous.
Yep.
Everyone said this was not a breaking of a law and that the facts weren't there and that this was not the forum to do it. And now, yes, you're seeing nonstop coverage on some left-wing media outlets.
Yesterday, President Trump echoed that thought, Mollie.
It's ridiculous. I'm supposed to be in Georgia. I'm supposed to be in New Hampshire. I'm supposed to be in Ohio and lots of other places. And they have me sitting here for a Biden trial. It's a Biden trial. And I never saw so many prosecutors. They're all sitting in the room over nothing. Over absolutely nothing. There's no crime.
By the way, it is a Biden trial. I saw Kristi Noem, before we learned that she shot her puppy in the face, was on CNN with Dana Bash 10 days ago. And she made the same point, that this is all connected to the Biden White House and the Merrick Garland Justice Department. And Dana Bash said, well, there's no evidence of that. But can you, because I saw you make this case on Fox earlier this weekend.
Yeah, you keep on hearing left-wing media say there's no evidence that Biden is involved. And it's just completely preposterous. I mean, even apart from this trial, we've had stories like in the New York Times about how Biden was upset that his own DOJ wasn't indicting his top political opponent.
He was raging. What are they waiting for?
I just want to point out, we had an impeachment over a phone call about corruption in Ukraine involving the Biden family business. And yet you can just go to the New York Times and say, hey, I'd like Merrick Garland to get moving on this indictment. But in this case, in the New York trial, Biden's number 3 at DOJ is the actual prosecutor.
Yeah.
That's not no evidence. That's like loud clanging cymbals.
What was his title? Deputy Attorney General or Assistant Deputy Attorney General, whatever it is. He left the Justice Department from his political appointment to work as a prosecutor, a shoe leather prosecutor in the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. Nobody does that.
No, but I mean, like, nobody would leave the cushy, awesome number 3 spot at DOJ to be a line prosecutor for the New York City prosecution here. But it wasn't just Matthew Colangelo.
And by the way, his name, thank you. You were just saying it. Matthew Colangelo is the name of the prosecutor you're talking about who left DOJ and is now, he's the guy in the courtroom making the case prosecuting Donald Trump.
Yeah, Biden works with this law firm in New York City, and they sent over multiple of their top attorneys to help that office with their prosecutions of Donald Trump.
And that's a law firm that the Biden family has funneled tons of money
and that
to.
Democrats have worked with for years and years. That's another thing you don't normally do is go from your top-paying cushy gig at a New York City law firm to working for the New York City prosecutor. But it's also obviously just completely coordinated because we wouldn't have all these trials dropping at the last minute to interfere with an election if it weren't highly coordinated from top officials.
Meanwhile, yesterday, the judge in this case about a non-disclosure agreement, I don't know about you, but it's just, sorry, Fox does this and it drives me nuts when they do it too. We do it. It drives me nuts when we do it, when they call it a hush money trial. It's such they do it on purpose.
Yeah, it's loaded language.
Yes. Hush money to a porn star, hush money to a porn star. They want that out there. There's nothing illegal about the payment that went to, and there's nothing in the indictment that says that it was illegal. They're claiming it's a bookkeeping error, which of course is why we have to prosecute a former president because of a bookkeeping error. That said, the judge fined Trump $9,000 for violating the gag order, but I thought Trump had been adhering to the gag order. I thought it was brilliant the other day where he was reading what other people were saying instead of it, being his own opinion. So what happened yesterday?
Well, just first off, gag orders are almost always done, and they're always done prior to this situation to protect the defendant, not to hurt the defendant. And if they are applied, they're applied to everybody. This judge, whose daughter is making a lot of money as a Democrat fundraiser, running campaigns that relate to, by the way, lawfare against Trump, put Donald Trump under a gag order and then said he violated it by reading what other people were saying about the trial. And I think his reasoning was that in one case he had like one word off for what Jesse Waters had said on Fox News versus what he said Jesse Waters said. And so therefore it became his own speech, and therefore he violated the gag order. This gag order, again, completely a violation of Donald Trump's free speech rights here.
But you get fined $9,000 for misquoting somebody by one word. I guarantee you, if that were the case, there were a lot of journalists in this town who would be bankrupt if they had to pay a fine like that for misquoting somebody.
Yeah, everything about it is ridiculous. And again, Donald Trump is being held. Donald Trump, the defendant, who this court should be thinking very seriously about protecting, is the one person who's held under it.
Yeah, in fact, Michael Cohen, who's a star witness for the prosecution, he's going everywhere. I mean, he's got Laura Ingraham was talking about this last night, and apparently he's actually profiting right now. Star witness for the prosecution is profiting from his stature on this trial.
Michael Cohen is apparently, by the way, doing nightly TikTok live streams where he talks Trump and the trial. Fascinating. And according to ABC News, he even makes money off of this tripe. Now, this is who Bragg's entire case hinges on? A convicted felon and a liar who's trying to cash in on the prosecution. Meanwhile, they use this sham proceeding to try to silence a president.
It's almost like election interference. I mean, if you were to use loaded words like that.
Well, it's complete and utter election interference. But also, if this were happening in Russia, if Putin were doing this to, we would be up in arms about the conditions that are being described here. And yet, again, people are just acting like it's totally okay and normal that we're trying to imprison and bankrupt the regime's top political opponent and his entire family.
Well, it's not working. In a minute, we'll tell you about the latest battleground polls, especially in Pennsylvania, where there was also, even more important than the polls, a decision by the Third Circuit of federal courts that will potentially help with election integrity in that state. We're going to give you all those details in just a moment. But first, at 6:15.
Weeknights with Mark Levin, 6 to 9 p.m.
On News Talk 105.9 WMAL, making sense of the news.
I'm going to give you the battleground poll numbers that just came in from Emerson. But before that, quickly, even more important poll, I think, from CNN. 56% of the American people do not believe Donald Trump is getting a fair trial or can get a fair trial for that matter. That's, I think, huge because even if and I am expecting a prosecution in this Manhattan jury pool, right? Even if he's prosecuted,
convicted, yeah.
Convicted, I should say, excuse me. A majority of Americans don't think it's fair.
It actually was really interesting when the indictments started rolling out, again, just in time for the election,
Yes.
that everyone thought this was going to be lights out for the Republican nominee. And so many Americans looked at this and said, actually, regardless of what I think about Donald Trump, what is happening to this man is so horrific that I think it has actually helped him a little bit with having some of these big numbers.
You make him a sympathetic figure, absolutely, understandably. All right, so here's the battleground polls, and this includes Robert F. Kennedy and Cornel West and Jill Stein, which is what all the polls should include. By the way, now I don't understand why anybody's doing a two-person poll because it's going to be those names will be on the ballot. Wisconsin, Trump up 5 over Biden. North Carolina, Trump up 9 over Biden. Nevada, Trump up 5 over Biden. It's supposed to be Nevada. Is Nevada?
Nevada.
Yeah, all right. Sorry. You know this. You're a Mountain West girl. Michigan, Trump up 1 over Biden. Georgia, Trump up 6 over Biden. Arizona, Trump up 4 over Biden. And Pennsylvania, Trump up 4 over Biden. Those numbers just keep growing. The tightest one is Michigan by just 1 point. But that's devastating for Team Biden.
It's extremely bad for Biden, although Republicans should also remember that Democrats have figured out a very good way to move ballots into ballot boxes and that the sentiment of the country is not as important as it used to be in elections.
Well, but that brings us to this decision. Pennsylvania earlier had a really quaint notion. They decided and mandated it through law the right way, through state legislators rather than through the Secretary of State as they did in 2020, an unelected official determining how to count ballots. They've actually passed the law that said if you put in a mail-in ballot or an absentee ballot, it has to have a valid date on it. Seems like a no-brainer to protect from voter fraud.
Yeah,
right?
Pennsylvania only recently moved to allow unsupervised mail-out balloting, but they said you have to replicate what happens in person. So in person, you sign and date your you sign into the polling place and you date. And so they said you have to do that with your mail-out ballot.
Both of those make sense because, number one, you want to make sure that the person on the ballot is the person who's voting. Of course, the only way you can do that is with an ID, but set that aside for a minute. And you want to make sure that the ballots aren't coming in after Election Day to, flood the zone with more ballots that you need so your guy can win.
Yeah, legal documents need to be signed and dated. That's just how it is. And so they made that requirement, and then some municipalities were accepting it without signatures and dates. And so it was brought to trial, and a Third Circuit panel said, no, you have to follow the law. It says you have to sign and date, so you have to do that. And lefty groups, Democrat groups, really worked hard to not have that be enforced, and
your
they lost.
Favorite lawyer, Mark Elias.
Yes.
Kind of your bête noir. He's sort of your Joker to your Batman, I would say. He was taking up the case. He said, no, this is critically important. Pennsylvania needs to be able to count ballots that can't be verified, basically, in terms of their authenticity or their timeliness of being delivered. And he lost yesterday, big time.
Yeah, he lost. And I do want to point out he's the guy behind the Russia collusion hoax of 2016.
Yep.
He also was the guy behind making all of our laws less secure for voting in 2020. And it is interesting to me how much he's focused on making elections open to fraud, having the laws be so that you could commit fraud. And it always goes in that direction for him.
And it's always done under the guise of voter rights. This is gonna silence voices out there who are trying to vote. Pennsylvania was one of the states that Senator Cruz and Senator Hawley were going to object to, were in the process of objecting to, on January 6th. And we were going to have demonstrations and a floor debate and a discussion about what happened in Pennsylvania and why we should call into question the legitimacy of the members of the Electoral College that day. And then January 6th happened, and that debate never happened, and that discussion never happened, and we've never revisited exactly what happened on 2020.
And on that note, while this was a good decision for people who care about election integrity and making sure that people aren't disenfranchised through not doing
through having your legitimate vote, canceled.
There remain a ton of problems in Pennsylvania, all of which are being litigated or fought in one way or another. So.
Right. But in 2020 specifically, most of the problems were all put through by their state Secretary of State, an appointed official, not through the state legislatures. And the Constitution is clear that it's the state legislators that are supposed to determine these things.
It is absolutely clear.
So but I'm an election denier, apparently. It's 6:23.
Now,
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
6:37 now, O'Connor and Company on this Wednesday morning. It's a hump day. You know what that means. Does anyone know where Bill Clinton is? Was the latest from him? Well, we'll get to the bottom of that as well at some point. Joining us later in this vital morning program at 7:05, Scott Walker, former Wisconsin governor, where Donald Trump will be giving a rally today, but also on the campus of University of Wisconsin. We've got new protesters. He's the president of Young America's Foundation. He knows a thing or two about campus protests, so we'll talk to Scott Walker at 7:05. 7:35, Virginia Lieutenant Governor Winsome Sears, and at 8, early voting starts this week for the primaries in Virginia, so we'll talk about that. And at 8:05, Congressman Michael Waltz of Florida. I'm Larry O'Connor. Mollie Hemingway is in today for Julie Gunlock, and it's been fun so far, Mollie. Are you awake yet?
I'm getting there.
You just got your second round of coffee. I saw that, so this is going to be fun. Cal Thomas is with us, as he always is on Wednesday mornings. Good morning, Cal.
Good morning, Larry, and good morning, Mollie. So good to talk to you. You look great on Fox. You sound good. And looking forward to your sounding at least as good on WMAL, which is vital, by the way, Larry, because it's the only show that would get me up other than my alarm clock at this hour.
Well, we are very honored then, Cal. Yes, listen, we were talking about this earlier. It seems remarkable that it is now sort of an open, understood element of these campus protests that they are being coordinated and funded across state lines, by the way, which last time I checked, if you're funding illegal operations across state lines, that triggers an FBI investigation and Justice Department scrutiny. But you're looking into this, Cal, and it really is Soros money here. It's not a conspiracy theory if it's fact.
Yeah, it's not only the Soros money, it's the Rockefeller Brothers Foundation and other liberal outfits. This is really disgusting. I've been calling on this for ages for the media to look into this because it's so obviously coordinated. You look at these tents, you look at the signs nicely printed. These kids are not sitting in the basement or in their dorms doing these perfectly printed signs. They don't have printers in their dorm rooms. I mean, what could be more obvious than this? And finally, the New York Post, and finally, Fox News, and I don't know about some of the other networks. I don't see a whole lot in the New York Times. As a matter of fact, I don't see anything in the New York Times or the Washington Post about this. But it's clearly being funded. It was a great cartoon I saw yesterday in one of the newspapers. It depicted a homeless guy sitting outside the gate at Columbia University and asking someone if they're finished with the tents, could he have one?
But, Cal, you know why a lot of these publications don't focus on it. Let me spell it out for you. You got these protesters who are singing who are chanting "Death to Israel, Death to Jews," and other horrific anti-Semitic slogans as they're chanting them on these college campuses. It's being funded by George Soros. If you point out that George Soros is funding it, then the media will call you an anti-Semite for pointing out the funding, but they overlook the anti-Semitism of what's being funded, which is screaming "Death to Jews." See, that's the world we live in, Cal.
Well, as our friend Chris Plant always says, if the left didn't have double standards, they had no standards at all. I've been going back and looking at some of the language used in the rise of the Nazis in the 1930s against the Jewish people. I've got a column coming on this tomorrow, and my conclusion is that you have to diminish and demean a group of people in order to do terrible things to them. That's what happened to black people in America to justify slavery. They were counted as 3/5 of the number of white inhabitants of a particular state in the South, Jim Crow laws. But listen to some of the words that Nazis used to diminish Jews: rats, lice, cockroaches, foxes, and vultures.
Wow.
And this was repeated over and over again until the German people became anesthetized to it and began to accept it and embrace it. And, of course, that led to the Holocaust. This is dangerous stuff. This is a whole generation that has been raised now, Larry and Mollie, that has been told they don't have to be accountable for anything. Look, they're asking for amnesty. They break in windows. They keep Jewish students from going to class, studying for their exams. Schools are now talking about cutting off commencements. These are kids who couldn't experience commencement in high school because of COVID, so they're going to get a double shot here. This is disgraceful, and the world is laughing, and of course Hamas and the other terrorist groups, China and Russia, they're showing all this stuff all over television, showing that America is in decline.
Cal,
it is a disgrace.
This is horrible to see some of the similarities back to the 1930s. Doesn't it also seem, though, that this is the natural result of an ideology that has completely taken over campuses in recent years? I mean, it was just a few years ago that we were seeing some of the race hatred affiliated with the BLM riots, this view that you're either oppressor or oppressed. I mean, isn't this just what we've been teaching these students for a long time?
Mollie, this is why you get such a high salary. This is such great insight. You're absolutely correct, and it starts in the academic halls. You have some of these professors leaving the classrooms and demonstrating with the students. You have some of them at Columbia that are grossly anti-Semitic and teaching all of these horrible things. How does this happen? How do these college presidents tolerate this stuff? I think, you have people like Robert Knight now, the owner of the New England Patriots, and other wealthy Jewish people who have been big contributors to these schools for years, now threatening to pull out their contributions. That will get the attention, along with students not coming back.
Yeah.
And some Jewish students have said they're not coming back and paying this horrible tuition of $66,000 at Columbia and more.
Well,
I think that's going to get their attention.
as deep as Robert Kraft's pockets are, the federal government has even deeper pockets, and maybe they should step up and say, no more federal funding for these institutions. Their endowments are plenty.
Yeah, Harvard, for example, has the greatest endowment in history, well over $1 billion. Why are they getting federal help?
Good idea. Good question.
Some of these others, I mean, this is just crazy. This is like flying in illegal immigrants from Venezuela. Oh, wait a minute.
Wait a minute. That's exactly what we're doing. Cal Thomas, always good to talk with you. We'll look forward to your column tomorrow. Thanks, sir.
Thank you. Thanks, Mollie.
Well, over on the morning show on MSNBC, and y'all don't watch it because, well, it's a trash show, and also you're too busy listening to us, but it's Morning Joe. You know about the Morning Joe thing, Mollie Hemingway? Apparently it's named after Joe Scarborough.
Oh,
Yeah.
I was wondering.
He used to be a conservative Republican.
Yeah, he's consistent.
Well, then he got a job in Manhattan on MSNBC, and he married a blonde bombshell Democrat. And, well, one thing leads to another, and suddenly you're not so conservative anymore. But everything that happens on Morning Joe right now has nothing to do with principles and values and hard-fought American ideals. No, it's about keeping Democrats in power. That's all that matters to them. And anything that hurts Joe Biden's chances this November is a problem. And they have discovered that these protests, no bueno for Joseph.
Your point, I think that's where that's the place we've all been sitting in watching this, going, what the hell is going on? What are these universities doing? Why aren't they doing something? And I'll echo the horror that this does look like January 6th. What a terrible example for our students. At the same time, these are young adults, and the question is, why do you choose to learn about the complexities of other situations around the world? But this one, you want to set up an encampment. This one, you want to scare people. This one, you want to come to the edge of violence or even go to violence.
Not the
this
edge.
one,
They're
you
breaking
risk
into buildings.
your future and your education for. See, I think these college students obviously are missing the part where they need to see what's going on across the country with these protests, that it's now in the realm of violence. It's in the realm of hatred, whether some are peaceful or not.
Mollie, can I just ask, where the hell have they been? It's like when these protests were, helping their guy during 2020 and Black Lives Matter, I don't remember them objecting to any of these tactics.
Oh, I love the line about January 6th. There have been 1,000 January 6th done by the left in recent years. And the only reason why they're freaking out about this is that it is hurting their electoral chances. But what's also not similar to January 6th is that you don't see people coming in and putting a stop to everything. I mean, finally they did, I guess, last night in a few different places.
Yeah, but did they arrest anyone?
And you're not going to see prosecutions where they're asking for 10 years of someone in prison time. You won't even see any repercussions at all.
Well, another difference with January 6th is that I don't see campus police holding open the doors of the buildings, welcoming people to come on in, which is literally what we saw with many of the protesters who entered the Capitol building, where Capitol Police opened the door and Grandma was able to come in and take a selfie for Instagram.
Yeah, another slight difference.
Yeah, that's a slight difference. But I do like Joe.
Where the adults are.
Where the adults. Where are the adults? Mika went on to compare this to, they all love 1968. You know, what happened in 1968 again? Oh, that's right. All these protests ended up electing Richard Nixon, and that's what they're terrified of.
To NBC News in 1968 about ongoing protests at the school in opposition to the Vietnam War.
I've got to say, it makes as much sense in 2024 having 18 or 19-year-old people running college campuses as it did in 1968, which is to say, doesn't make any sense at all. And you do wonder where the adults are.
But the adults are actually protesting with the kids.
Yeah, there are members of Congress that are supporting these protests.
Yes,
Democrat members of Congress. This isn't fringe. This is totally mainstream part of the Democrat Party, even if they wish it weren't. Although I do think it's interesting, 1968, we saw those horrible riots right in front of the Democrat convention in Chicago.
Yeah.
Where's the Democrat convention going to be this year?
Hey, they're getting the band back together again.
It might be some fun.
Chicago. Yeah, you're right. Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, who is an adult, I suppose, she basically framed these protests as you're either pro-genocide or anti-genocide. Well, although she thinks there actually is a potential genocide, the people who were chanting from the river to the sea, which would result in genocide, but she doesn't even see that.
And AOC was out there strongly supporting the protesters. I mean, she was valiantly defending them. Even with split image of violence happening at the protest, she was calling them peaceful protesters.
Yes. Well, Joe went on a bit of an unhinged rant. He's so exercised about this because he knows it's hurting his guy. And it reached a point where Mika was trying to jump in, and he was like, don't talk to me while I'm talking, little lady.
Where the adults are, the adults that are supposed to be running the university, the amount of money that they are paid to educate students, and they can't allow students to go to class.
Again, where were you when Ben Shapiro wanted to give a speech on campus and they weren't allowed?
By the way, it actually is kind of offensive here. We've experienced years of shutting down conservative speech, of hostility to conservative students, a complete failure to have conservative professors, and only now are people starting to get upset. And it's like, where did you think this was all going?
They are Hamas on college campuses when they chant that.
Some of them may not even know what they're doing.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the point.
But the adults there do.
Yes, they do.
And yet, by the way, this is a long time coming. This has been coming since the 1960s. And now the people that were burning down college campuses, the people that were taking over presidents' offices, those people are now on the faculty senate, trying to encourage these students to do the same.
And Joe was totally for this when it was hurting Republicans in 2020, when the riots were designed to unseat Republican administration. And now that it threatens his party, now he's pretending to be upset about it. It is not, by the way, the adults at that school are the ones teaching these kids this hatred.
It's 6:53.
Making sense of your world.
Thank you for your clear insight.
News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
This is a major wake-up call.
Making sense